What's up guys, my name is Simo, and this is my buddy Cilantro. We're gonna go over some beginner-friendly tips for Palworld, in case you're either new or haven't played the game yet, or maybe just coming back after a while and need a refresher. I'm gonna cover levels 1 through 20, which I'm calling the early game. I got some requests on my previous video to cover base progression as well as some strategies to tackle early bosses. Hopefully this video will answer all of those questions. I also made this detailed chart that I will have up on the screen later for you to screenshot, or you can download it with the link in the description. Alright, let's get to it. Palworld is a massive game, not only in size, but also the systems and features it offers. There's a ton of things to do, and you have a lot of freedom to just play however you want. There's always something cool and interesting wherever you look, so it's easy to get distracted. On the flip side, it's easy to miss that the early game progression is fairly linear if you want an efficient base. The primary objective is to start producing cakes as quickly as possible so that you're ready to start breeding the moment it unlocks. Now, to avoid information overload, I'm going to split this video into 3 sections with lots and lots of subsections. Timestamps are in the description. Let's start with the basics. Once you name your world, you have the option to select the difficulty and customize the settings depending on how chill or punishing you want the experience to be. I would suggest taking a minute to glance at the custom settings because you can tweak a lot of them to suit your playstyle. You can always just come back and adjust them anytime you want. Now, if you're like me and don't have the time to grind hours and hours for resources, then just scroll all the way down and adjust these 3 sliders. For gatherable items multiplier, I go with 3. This triples the number of resources you get when you break down trees, stones, ores, and so on. For gatherable objects health multiplier, let's go with 0.5. It lowers the health of those objects that you have to break, so they basically break faster. Now, unless they've patched it since the last time I tested it, I believe this affects trees differently. The amount of stone and ore and so on you get from those resources is the same, even though the health is lower, but the wood you get is less. But then again, trees are everywhere, so it's really not that big of a deal. For dropped items multiplier, I typically go with 2. 3 felt a little too high for me. This affects the items that pals drop when defeated, captured, or butchered, including bosses. Alright, once you finish making your character and jump into the world, the game does a pretty good job of walking you through the basics, so I'm not going to milk the time here and increase the length of this video by tediously going over every single step. The game's tutorial is called Journey. It should already be up on your screen by default, but if for some reason it's not, or if you want to get rid of it, just go to Settings, Game Settings, Common, Display Journey. Now just craft your tools, grind some resources, and complete the tasks that show up. And don't be in a rush to place down your base as soon as the game says so. Take your time, explore a bit, see if you can find a place you like. There are also plenty of great videos already that go over base locations, but I'll throw one of my own suggestions in later in the video. As you're exploring, try to catch at least one of every pal you come across. Not only will it fill up your pal deck and unlock tons of useful information about that pal, but it will also give you more options to choose from when you're ready to start assigning pals to your base or trying out different team combinations. I'll go over all of this in more detail later. Now let's move on to the essentials. This section has a lot of information, especially if you haven't played the game yet and you have no idea what I'm talking about. But I will do my best to keep it as simple and concise as possible so I'm not overwhelming you with all this information. Let's start with leveling up. You get experience for nearly everything you do in the game. Even if you just queue up things like food or ammo for your pals to craft, you get experience while you're in the base. But the best and fastest way to level up is to capture pals, including bosses. And then catching a total of 12 of one pal will also give you a large chunk of experience at once. Buying pals from vendors or hatching eggs also counts towards all of this. Now each time you level up, you gain a stat point. Don't waste them on anything other than weight, stamina, and health. Work speed seems enticing, but as you start getting better and better pals, it quickly becomes redundant. Focus on weight till you have about 800 to 1000, whatever feels good to you, because this is one of the biggest pain points in the early game. Then get the stamina up to 180 to 200. I found this more than sufficient for most situations like climbing, gliding, swimming, combat, and so on. But you can go as high as you want if this doesn't feel good enough. Then just dump the rest of the points into health. And as you progress, you will get gear, accessories, as well as these elixirs that permanently increase one of your stats. Now let's talk about Satiety and Sanity. Both you and your pals have a hunger meter that you have to manage. This can be recovered pretty easily by eating anything that has a nutrition value. There are no side effects to eating raw food, but cooked food will give you more nutrition. Your pals also have a sanity meter that slowly drains as they work, but it drains faster if they're stressed or hungry. And as far as I know, it does not affect combat, just their work. They can recover sanity by sleeping, bathing, and eating foods that have a sanity value. If the sanity meter gets low enough, they stop working and they start acting like pouty teenagers, or they can develop conditions like depression or other injuries like fractures and so on. There are medicines in the game that can treat all of that. But unless the pal has some good passive skills and you have a replacement available, just fire it. We don't have time for lazy employees who can't work through a simple fracture.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Or even better, just condense it into the next pal and it can't sue you for wrongful termination. Anyway, once you set up your base and place down a campfire, cook all the food you have. Foods like pancakes and bread are great because they're easy to make and give a nice boost to both nutrition and sanity. Although keep in mind that we will need wheat for cakes as well, so don't use all of it up if you don't have a big supply. If you have the coin, you can just purchase these ingredients from a vendor. A good alternative to it is the mushroom soup, but obviously you're going to have to spend time gathering the mushrooms. And if it still feels like your pals are constantly low on sanity, get yourself a woolly pop. It drops cotton candy when assigned to the ranch. It doesn't have a lot of nutritional value, so don't put it in their feed box. Just add the pal to your party and force feed it until they're happy. Now speaking of feed box, pals will always eat the leftmost item first. You can also go to the feed box settings and uncheck the ingredients box to stop your pals from putting random food ingredients in there. They'll just start taking it to the cooler box once you have that placed down. And a quick tip, sorting your inventory or any storage refreshes the spoil timers. This always felt like a glitch to me, but they still haven't fixed it, so maybe it's intended. Next is technology points. These are used to unlock recipes on your technology tree for your gear, weapons, saddles, and so on. You get 6 technology points per level, but it's not enough to unlock every item on your tree. So you do have to be a bit selective until you're able to get more points from other sources, like unlocking fast travel, chests at the end of a dungeon, and chests scattered around the sanctuaries. I think certain pals have a very low chance of dropping these, and so on. I would suggest prioritizing production-related items like workbenches and other upgrades for your base first, then go for your gear, and then maybe the decorative items. Next is ancient technology points. These help you unlock the special items on the right side of your tech tree. To craft these items, we need the ancient technology parts. They're dropped by alpha pals. Basically, these are the ones that have icons on the map. Dungeon bosses and tower bosses drop them as well. You can easily farm these early game by defeating or capturing Chillet over and over. Bosses respawn every 1 hour. So whenever possible, try to capture these alpha pals because you can butcher them and get the same drops all over again. Some of them even have a chance to drop legendary schematics for armor and weapons, so butchering them basically give you 2 chances of getting the schematics. Let's take a quick look at some of these special items, starting with the egg incubator. This is what you use to hatch pals. Depending on how much patience you have, you can adjust the setting to as low or high as you want. 0 makes it so the eggs hatch instantly. 1 is a good number for your first playthrough. It can be a fun little minigame to control the conditions to bring the timer down. Just add or remove campfires depending on if the egg is hot or cold. And if you're hatching different types of eggs, just space out the incubators so they're outside the campfire's range. These are the incubation times with our setting of 1 for normal eggs, large eggs, and huge eggs. Personally, I keep my setting at 0 now because once I started breeding seriously, it just became too tedious and boring to manage like 30 incubators at once. Next is the small feed bag. It unlocks a food slot in your inventory, so you and your pals automatically eat the food when you're hungry. You get more slots as you unlock better quality feed bags. Personally, I've never felt the need to have more than 1 slot because you and your pals only eat the items in the first slot, but it can be useful as basically extra inventory spaces. Now the grappling gun. This is an incredibly useful tool with lots of uses. Most importantly, it lets you cover a lot of ground even if you're encumbered. It comes in 4 qualities: basic, mega, giga, and hyper. And of course, higher quality means longer reach. I like to build these platforms over my chest so I can just shoot around my base like Batman. Now I'm using the hyper grappling gun here, so it can go pretty far, but even with the two lowest quality ones, you can just alternate like this because they don't share a cooldown. And if you're feeling impatient, you can just unequip and re-equip them to reset the timer. My favorite part though is when you can just launch yourself like this by letting go at just the right time. Next is the PAL condenser. Here's a clip I made about this in the previous video. Condensing is a process of combining a bunch of the same PALs into one to upgrade it. It's indicated by stars. Getting the first 2 stars isn't too bad, but to get to 4 stars you need a total of 116 PALs. Now let's move on to the PAL element chart. You can find it in the survival guide. It's pretty standard and it lays out which element is strong or weak against another. But for some strange reason, it's missing some key details. Thankfully, Master Smash on Reddit posted this useful image, which explains everything very clearly. You can just pause the video and take a look at it if you're interested. Alright, Palbox. Now this is what you place down to establish your base. You can have multiple bases, so don't worry too much about having the perfect location right away. And you can give a lot more thought to this when you're ready to make a more permanent base. You can also adjust the settings to increase the maximum number of bases you can have, as well as how many PALs can be assigned per base. For your starter base, just try to find a place that is nice and flat and has basic resources like trees, stone, ore, and so on. And you can also utilize your Palbox as a custom fast travel point. Once you unlock a second base at around level 10, you can just drop a Palbox in a spot with lots of resources, harvest everything there, then fast travel back. This area in the video is just across the bridge behind Chillit. Alright, now let's talk about the base location. This is one of my picks. I like it for a starter base because it's surrounded by passive PALs, so it's pretty safe until you're ready to build some defenses around it. Even if you're raided, you have plenty of time to respond because the raiders attack from the direction of the tower and run all the way down the hill. The area has pretty much everything you need, from berries, mushrooms, trees, paldium nodes to stone, ore, as well as a bunch of wild eggs. Just keep an eye on the blue outline when you're placing your Palbox down, because your pals will automatically harvest any resources that spawn inside your base, provided that they have the right work suitability. So a pal like Tansy with lumbering will farm the trees. Someone with at least 1 mining can break stone, but in order to break ore, you need minimum of mining 2. And if you want to prevent certain resources from spawning in your base, just build a structure or a chest or anything over it and it will stop spawning. As soon as you remove the structure, it'll spawn back up again. Now once you have your base down, focus on upgrading it as quickly as possible because this opens up more slots for your pals. Just go to your Palbox, select upgrade base, then craft whatever it wants you to. As for the base layout, your top priority is to minimize the distance your pals have to travel across your base, from one station to another, to feed box, to go take a bath, and all these things. But you also have to make sure that you space out your structures and stuff enough so your pals don't get stuck everywhere. Place down similar workstations close to one another, like plantations, mill, crusher, and so on that require a water pal, so your pal's not wasting time traveling from one corner to another. And then you can also place feed boxes and chests next to workstations and resource nodes. Because as long as a chest is inside your base, workstations can access those resources when crafting. Now let's discuss pals. Starting with partner skills. Try to look at them every time you catch a new pal. These can vary greatly, from providing simple utility to something complex to passive buffs or a cooldown ability that can be manually activated. And you can build a lot of creative strategies and playstyles around these partner skills. It will also tell you whether the pal has unlockable gear. You will only ever need to craft one of these, and it goes into your key items tab, which is great because it doesn't take up inventory space or adds to your weight. This is what allows you to ride your pals. Some only function as mounts, while others like Mosanda or Grizzbolt let you hop on their backs and unleash devastation with their respective weapons. Now on to passive skills. Each PAL can have up to 4 passive skills and they come in 3 tiers. These are basically a percentage increase or decrease to your PAL's stats, skills, hunger, sanity, work speed, and so on. Try not to sell or condense PALs that have good passive skills. Even if you don't use them, if you ever plan on breeding, you just never know when one of those can be useful in a breeding combination. It can save you a lot of time later. Here are some examples of good and bad passive skills. You can just pause the video to take a look at them. Now let's talk about active skills. These are basically a PAL's moves or attacks. PALs automatically learn certain skills as they level up, but you can also use skill fruits to teach them new ones. There are no restrictions on this, so you can teach any move to any PAL. You can find skill fruits randomly lying on the ground, purchase them from certain vendors, and also dungeons, but primarily you get them from these trees that are scattered all over the world. There are a total of 21 trees, and if you come across one of them, make sure to mark it on your map so you can farm them regularly. Each tree always spawns with 3 fruits, and they respawn every 6 to 8 hours. Next is the monitoring stand. This lets you control exactly what you want your PALs to work on, and it will significantly improve your productivity. Until you get to level 15, just accept that things are going to be a bit inefficient in your base, especially if a PAL can do multiple jobs. It will constantly abandon tasks halfway through to run over and help with other things. You can manually assign a PAL to a workstation by picking them up and throwing them onto a station so they only focus on that specific task, and that is helpful, but the problem is, once that task is complete, they just stand there mindlessly. Now, work suitability, aka jobs. And for the rest of this video, I'm going to refer to this as jobs because I'll be using this a lot and jobs is much easier to say. Each PAL can specialize in 1 or more jobs which range from levels 1 through 4. Condensing a PAL to 4 stars increases all of their jobs by 1 level, up to a max of 5. And you cannot teach them new jobs or remove any existing ones. Always prioritize higher job levels even if a PAL has passives that increase its work speed. So for example, a PAL with Handiwork 2 and no passives will always beat a PAL with Handiwork 1, even if it has some or even all of the work speed passives. Now I'm going to take a minute to show you guys some numbers that made me realize just how wrong I was about this. Now I did my test on Handiwork, but then I read a comment later where someone said, watering, planting, and gathering follow a slightly different formula, so maybe I'll test that out in a different video. But I think the general premise is still the same. Level 2 will always beat level 1 with passives. Alright, to finish out this section, I'm going to list 6 things that I think you should try to get as soon as you see them. Unless obviously you don't have a way to get there. Fast travel points. Each one you unlock will give you 1 technology point, and obviously it'll let you fast travel. Skill fruits. I've already gone over it, but I just wanted to include it on this list. Wild eggs. Keep collecting them even if you haven't unlocked the incubator. Not only do you get experience when hatching the eggs, but you also have a chance to get PALs that you won't encounter until later levels. Life Monk effigies. These are the green shiny statues that you will see all over the place. They're useful for upgrading your catch rate at the Statue of Power. You'll only need a few for the first few levels, but it ramps up very quickly. Collect as many as you can while exploring, especially at nighttime, because they're very easy to spot. PAL souls. These are also used at the Statue of Power to boost your PAL's HP, defense, attack, and work speed. You can find them lying around on the ground, in various chests, dropped by PALs, and so on. And lastly, supply drops. They contain lots of useful goodies like schematics, pendants, oil, and elixirs that permanently boost one of your stats. Whew, okay, well, that completes section 2. Now let's move on to the final section and go over what progression looks like. Now at first I had 3 more pages of notes here, but I decided to just put them all onto this convenient chart so you don't have to hear me talking for another 20 minutes. I put this together with absolute beginners in mind, so I tried to keep it as simple and general as possible to cater to various playstyles. If you want to use it, treat it as a rough guideline or a checklist to try and stay on track. The PALs I listed are just some of the ones I could think of that you can encounter around those levels. If you happen to find better ones through eggs or exploration, then obviously use those. The priority is top to bottom, left to right. And as I said, there's also a link in the description in case you want to download it. If you still have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Let's talk about combat strategies. This was specifically requested, so I will go over a few basic strategies and team combos when tackling bosses in general. This is by no means the best and only way, just a playstyle that works for me. I'm not a super hardcore min-max player, I'm for the most part pretty casual, but I do enjoy optimizing up to a certain point. Honestly, for early game bosses, you can pretty much go with any team you like. You don't even have to worry about doing damage. You can just let your pals do all the work. Just focus on staying alive and keeping your team healthy by swapping them in and out regularly. If you withdraw a pal after using its partner skill, you can see the cooldown timer going down once you select it here. Although as far as I know, active skills don't seem to come off cooldown unless your pal is actually active. Your shield is very valuable. Once equipped, it's a barrier that's always active and absorbs incoming damage. It will regenerate after 25 seconds if you haven't taken any hits. Even if you just have a small amount of shield left, it can still tank a full hit. Status conditions like burning and poison are great against bosses with a lot of HP because they deal percentage damage. So bringing fire and poison crossbows or bows will be pretty handy. Keep some distance between you and your pal. Make sure to throw them out far away from you so the boss has to change directions to attack. That way you can sneak some shots in, maybe even headshots depending on the angle. If the boss is targeting you, focus on dodging or taking cover. If it's targeting your pal, focus on withdrawing just before the attack lands so your pal doesn't take any damage. And that's it, just rinse and repeat. As for the tower boss, just bring a couple of ground types on your team and you'll be fine. But if you want a more diverse team, let me show you where you can get Incineram. It's easily one of the strongest offensive pals in the game, and you can have it as early as level 10. There is a path that pretty much leads up all the way here. Once you get up here, you'll have these two syndicate thugs. One of them will throw out an Incineram. You can just focus on capturing it and boom. Just bring one or two water pals with you if you need, and it'll make your life pretty easy. Another great pal you can add to your team is Grizzbolt. You can find him here in the Wildlife Sanctuary, and the only way to get there is by using a water pal or a flying pal. Here's a list of pals that you can find at this location, but just a heads up, they're all level 20 or above. Alright, here's just a quick list of some fun cheesy combos you can use if you want. Each of the 4 pals that I have listed buffs their respective element by 10% each. So throwing in 4 Kelpsy Ignis alongside Incineram is going to buff Incineram's fire damage by 40%. And eventually, if you manage to condense each of them to 4 stars, then each of them will buff the fire damage by 20%, altogether being 80%. Kelpsy does the same for water, Who crits for dark, and so on. Each element has a pal that does the same. Alright, with all that done, we've reached our final destination, the breeding farm. Breeding is a critical part of the game, especially if you want to challenge late game bosses. But in order to get there, we need to first turn our base into a production factory. I've made an entire video on this to help you get a jump start with all the essential pals. And we're done. Let me know if I got anything wrong or forgot to include something. And lastly, I just want to say, I genuinely appreciate how much love and support you guys have shown me. I am absolutely blown away by the subs, the likes, and the views, and all of the amazing and positive comments. You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching. Peace.